St. George's. My name is Pastor Joe Hensley, and I am learning to welcome people in sign language. So this is the sign for welcome, which just is that inviting you in. I think that's a wonderful symbol. So I'm going to let the interpreters do the rest of this for me. But it is a joy for those of you who've been with us. Welcome back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here. And we are continuing and concluding our conversations this weekend about meditation as a spiritual practice, about accessibility, opening ourselves, taking away the barriers between us and God and each other. And this afternoon we are entering into a conversation about how meditation can be a practice which is practiced in different ways in different traditions, but can also bring people together. And what is the place that meditation has in our world today? So just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have a device that makes noise, go ahead and turn it off so that it won't disturb us. If you need a restroom or a break during the session, you can go out this door and there's a restroom. You go across the stairwell, and on the other side of the stairwell there's a restroom. You can also go out that door in the corner and down some stairs, and there's a couple of restrooms there. Afterwards, we'll have a chance to come downstairs for some refreshments and fellowship, just to continue the conversations with each other. And you can meet personally our guests. And you can also, if you haven't had a chance to make a donation in support of the weekend, I think Terry will be here a few more minutes to accept that, and we appreciate everybody's gifts. I want to just give another shout out to the Episcopal Conference for the Deaf, which is a national organization that generously provided us with some grant funding so that we could provide with interpreters and some of the other aspects of the weekend. So we're very thankful for that. And I want to say again, thanks to Beth Klein, who has been one of our champions of this weekend. Is Beth even? She's off ferrying people around, I think. So Beth helped to bring Ōshin Jennings to us, and we're so glad that she did. And I'd like to thank our other panelists who will be introduced in a minute for giving us your time and wisdom today. And Ed Jones, who is our moderator. Ed is a former editor of the Freelance Star newspaper here in Fredericksburg. I'm sure he'll tell you more about himself, but I just want to brag on him and thank you, Ed. Ed's been our moderator at these Lenten weekends for several years when we have these panel discussions. This is the 11th Lenten weekend that St. George's has had. I said this on Friday, I'll say it again. I'm indebted and standing on the shoulders of Gay Ron, who started this tradition at St. George's, and was excited to hear about our speaker this year as the tradition lives on. So, my sister Muna brought to my attention something that I just think we should be mindful of. There was a terrible airline accident today between Ethiopia and Kenya. And so as we gather as a wider community, we are mindful of so many things going on in the world. Let's just take a moment of silence and offer just some prayer in our silent hearts for those who have died and for those who are suffering. Lastly, I just want to say hello to everyone out there in Facebook Live land. We're glad you're here, joining us in spirit. We've had the talks on Friday evening and Saturday evening broadcast via Facebook, and there's been a lot of people who've been able to join us. And thank you to Laurel Loke, our parish administrator, for that technical support, as well as Achim Loke. And Laurel has also just been an amazing supporter, guide, source of wisdom, source of so many things to make this weekend happen. So thank you, Laurel. Now I'll turn it over to Ed and look forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much, Joe. Again, my name is Ed Jones. I'm a deacon in the Episcopal Church, one of about 24 in this diocese. And I have spent most of my worshiping life here at St. George's. So let me add my welcome to that of Joe's to all of you, to St. George's on this lonely afternoon, and also to this final event of our Lenten weekend for 2019. Our keynote speaker, the Reverend Ōshin Jennings, has been with us since Friday night. He has led us through discussions and demonstrations of meditation and contemplative prayer. This afternoon, we begin to broaden the discussion, to begin to put the pieces together, and to restate our goals, as Joe mentioned just a moment ago. If we can remove the barriers within ourselves, how can we then remove the barriers within our communities, and indeed within the world? All at a time of great division and great polarization. That's what we're going to try to figure out in the next 90 minutes. Or not. Or as Ōshin has taught us, it's okay to say, I don't know, because that keeps us open to new possibilities. So perhaps we will have to say, we don't know. First, we need to get the lay of the land. How do different faith communities and traditions participate in meditation? And then, how can we use meditation to build community and to break down barriers? That's the game plan for our time together. So we will begin the discussion up here, but we will definitely leave significant time for your questions. So please be meditating about those questions. Just not out loud if you don't mind, but please be thinking about what you might want to ask. Now, I recognize the irony of saying that we need to hurry along to have our discussion about the benefits of slowing down through meditation. But time's a-wasting, so let's get right to it with the introductions today. Let me begin on your right to welcome back yet again our very hard-working keynote speaker for the weekend. He's had, I think, 13, 14 different sessions with us. It's been amazing. The Reverend Ōshin Jennings, who many of you have gotten to know over the past 2 days. Ōshin is a Buddhist priest, a trained psychotherapist, and a multimedia artist from Philadelphia, but originally from Jersey. He is the first known deaf Buddhist monk, and he leads No Barriers Zen, a meditation community based in Washington. The aim of No Barriers Zen is to make meditation practices accessible to people of all abilities and all disabilities. Next to Ōshin is someone you just heard from, the Reverend Joe Hensley, who is the rector of St. George's Episcopal Church. Joe came to St. George's 4 years ago, having previously served as the assistant rector at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Durham, North Carolina. Before ordination, Joe worked for a community dispute resolution center as a mediator, facilitator, and trainer. And a notable fact, he is the first rector in the nearly 300-year history of St. George's to have worked as a professional clown. Now let me be very clear about that. Over the centuries here at St. George's, we have had more than our share of a few clowns, but never have we had a professional one. So Joe has that distinction. Next to him is Seham El-Ansary of Fredericksburg. She's an Islamic and interfaith scholar and community leader. She is the founder and director of the Women's Alliance for Humanity. She is a self-prosperity coach, a former education and management consultant, and a lifelong community activist who has dedicated her efforts to civic empowerment, women and youth training, interfaith outreach, and the betterment of the community. Much of this she did in California, living in the Bay Area. And we could spend the whole 90 minutes just talking about your resume. It sounds absolutely fascinating. And finally, on your left, Dr. John McLaughlin is a physician and a mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor. Who doesn't need someone like that? He has been involved with meditation and contemplative practices since his late teens. John is a co-founder of the Yoga Foundation of Fredericksburg, which is a nonprofit organization that offers yoga, mindfulness, and wellness workshops with a focus on the underserved in our community. So, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome our panel here today for our discussion. And any mistakes in those introductions can be made by you all later in the proceedings. You'll have plenty of time to do that. So let's begin our discussion by taking a moment to make sure we know the current state of meditation in our faith communities. And we hope, this is with the hope of succinct answers to a very broad question. So panel members, listen up. How is meditation viewed in Islam, in Christianity, in Buddhism, and in secular practice? What are the consistencies? What are the differences? What are the challenges? Simple questions. Ōshin, we're going to give you a break from the hot seat by starting this with our Rector, Joe Hensley. Joe, could you begin the answers to that question?
I want to just begin also by saying that we could have had a long table here with many traditions represented, and so I want to recognize we certainly don't have all the traditions here. I wish we could have more of it, but then it would be harder to have the conversation. So if some of you are coming from other traditions and want to chime in later, we'd love to hear more about that. I just want to say, to begin with, I grew up Christian. I was a cradle Episcopalian, baptized in the Episcopal Church, and then as a teenager, I thought I wanted to be Buddhist because I discovered an interest in meditation. I didn't know Christians could meditate. No one had ever told me about that before. And it wasn't until a few years later in my early 20s that I realized that there was this rich tradition of meditation with a Christian, through a Christian lens. And like everything Christian, it begins in the words of Scripture. So I want to read a couple of things from the Psalms, which of course aren't Christian Scripture, but are from our Hebrew ancestors. Psalm 4, which has the wonderful line that says, "When you are disturbed, do not sin. Ponder it on your beds and be silent." The translation in our Book of Common Prayer says, "Tremble and do not sin. Speak to your heart in silence upon your bed." Psalm 46, which many of us are familiar with, has this description of wars ceasing and God being the one who breaks the bow and shatters the spear and burns the shields with fire. And then God says, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still. There's an appreciation of stillness that comes from this tradition. And then the last one I wanted to read is Psalm 131. "O Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great or too marvelous for me, but I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother." I have calmed and quieted my soul. So there is this encouragement towards stillness and quietness that we get from the Hebrew Scriptures, and then a passage that we turn to from Christian Scriptures from Paul's letter to the Philippians, the Christ hymn in chapter 2, which says, "Let this akin to what our Buddhist friends are doing is the word contemplation," the Latin word contemplatio, which is just sitting in God's presence without thought. And this tradition of contemplation is something that was practiced more by mystics and monks in remote places. It was not a part of the mainstream Christian tradition for many, many, many centuries. In the 1970s, a Trappist monk named Thomas Keating brought some of this esoteric monastic tradition to the public light and developed something that we now call centering prayer. He took what he had received in his monastic training and kind of brought it into popular culture as a result, in response to all of the interest in meditation that was being seen, the Eastern meditation that was coming out of the Buddhist and Hindu traditions. And these Christian monks said, hey, wait a minute, we've got this in our tradition too. Let's figure out a way to communicate that. I know Ed said short answer, so I'm going to draw it kind of to a close. But I want to end this part of the answer with a quote from Bede Griffiths, who actually was a monk who predated Thomas Keating. But really what meditation is about for Christians, I think, is about becoming one with God. This union with God, being so close to God as that there could be no words that would pass between us. And Bede Griffiths said he was a Christian who was living in India, so he was right in the thick of the culture of meditation. He said there's 3 routes to the center. 3 routes to the center where God is. You can have a near-death experience, you can fall deeply in love, or you can start a meditation practice. He said, of the 3, meditation is the most reliable starting point. So meditation for us is a way toward that union, that center place with God.
Joe, before moving on to Ōshin, let me ask just one quick follow-up. Have you detected over the years personally any resistance among Christians to the role that meditation, or as we might call it, contemplation, might play in Christianity? Almost a resistance that, well, that's something else, that's not really Christian.
Yes. So that question came up this morning in our forum discussion with Ōshin. Someone said, I have a fundamentalist Christian friend who told me that meditation is bad. Emptying the mind is bad because then it leaves room for the devil. And that is a realistic, that is how some people think of meditation. They think if you dabble in these Eastern practices, they see the practices as things that aren't really faithful. That's just an opportunity for Satan to get a hold of us. I don't want to make light of that. I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of him, but there's a sense that it is by being too quiet where we don't know that voice that we hear. Well, we think it's God, but what if it's the devil?
Right.
And so there's a lot of skepticism in some parts of Christianity about contemplative practices, mystical, mysterious practices. There's always been a bit of a skepticism about mystics. That's why they're often seen as weird and strange, and they haven't been placed at the center of our tradition, even though most of the different Christian traditions have some form or fashion of mystics in them. So that is a challenge that we have when we talk about meditation, or we have to kind of clarify what it is we're talking about. If we say union with God, I think people would say, yeah, I'm all for union with God. It's how we get there.
Ōshin, when that matter came up this morning at the Adult Forum, you gave a response, but you did say that this would be something that would be worth talking about more. Is there anything more right now you wanted to say about it, in terms of this concern that was raised about an open mind invites evil thoughts?
Well, of course, I can only speak really from the Buddhist perspective. But I always find that going deep and making room for yourself and making room for these things and letting go and passing through these things, a lot of people find a great stillness and a great peace underneath all of that, a great equanimity. And I can think of no better experience or way to describe the divine or to describe God. But it's something I'm very interested in hearing from the other panelists about, because coming from a tradition that is not theistic, we don't really grapple with the God question. So we do deal with inner states, and especially in the West, like with MBSR, we're talking a lot about emotions and psychology and all those feeling states. So, but yes, and to speak to some of these other points, there's a fascinating tradition throughout each of our faiths and secular practices, and what emboldens me and makes me feel comforted is that we all kind of have arrived at some of the same things. And some of our practices, as we've explored this weekend, they look the same. We took Zazen, or seated meditation, literally, from our tradition, and we looked at centering prayer, and we looked at mantra meditation, and all these different practices. You know, they all share sometimes even the same framework, but just slight derivations in vocabulary. And I found that's really comforting. I feel like we're getting close to something that is universally human or universally divine underneath all of that.
Right.
Yeah. Regardless of culture or language or any of the overlays, what's underneath? Right.
And in terms of the role that meditation plays in the Buddhist tradition, it's central, correct? It's at the core.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'd all started with the founder of Buddhism as practicing as an ascetic in India and the border of Nepal and that region, and experiencing being truly a student of himself. And the technology, if you will, that he used was contemplation, meditation. Those two words in our history of the English language actually flipped meanings, contemplation and meditation. But he was meditating, and that's how he arrived at his truths. And so throughout history, all these different sects of Buddhism, which there are many, they all have their own approaches and their own emphasis on meditation. I come from the Zen school, a specific sect of Zen, and Zen means meditation. So that is our bread and butter. That's our main practice, and we do a lot of it. So all the culture and the artwork and the creativity and all the beautiful things that Zen is known for, from rock gardens to ink paintings, all of those things actually come from a way to try and express some of these things that I think we're all going to find we maybe have words for, we maybe don't have words for, these expressible and inexpressible states and feelings.
Thank you. Yes, Joe.
One other thought that came to mind about the skepticism is that although there are these descriptions of stillness and quietness and self-emptying in Scripture, Jesus never says, I want you to meditate. Jesus never gives explicit instructions about how to meditate, and his instructions to pray involve words. And so I think for Christians for whom the Bible is the beginning, the middle, and the end, as far as the foundation of faith, they are very skeptical of anything that doesn't come out of the Bible. And because we don't have that technology, as the word Ōshin used, of here's how to do it, and this is what you should do, it's seen as an interpretive gloss on, well, yeah, I guess that could be a way that you would interpret that, but it's not what it actually says. I think that's some of the source, too.
Seham, you are an Islamic scholar. What role does meditation play in your faith tradition?
Well, do we have any meditation?
Hmm?
Do we? Does Islam has any meditation? I think we do. We have two kinds of meditation. Voluntarily, and there is another one, mandatory. But before I discuss these types of meditation, I would like for us to just take a couple of minutes to understand the concepts behind the Islamic meditation. What concepts that the Muslim mind has before they go on with their meditation. Concept number one is the concept of God. Who is God to the Muslims? Muslims believe in one God who has no gender, no equals, no partners, nothing and no one is like him. He is the supreme. He is the protector. He is the absolute. He is the eternal. He is the provider. He is the master of all the worlds. He is the master of heaven and earth. He is the master of the universe. He is the source of energy. He is the source of comfort. He is the greatest, the most high, the most merciful, the most compassionate, the most forgiving. He is the source of light and enlightenment and source of peace. That is the God of Muslims. Now, the second concept that they have is the concept of worship. Muslims believe in the servitude to God. We all servants of God. We serve God through serving humanity, serving the society, serving the community, serving the needy, the ill, the weak. Any kind of service, that's a service to God. Also, they do believe in surrender and submission to God and God's will. And as a matter of fact, that is the definition of Islam. Attaining peace through the submission and the surrender to God and God's will. They also have a concept of to God we all belong and to Him we shall return. That means we are here in this world, a temporary life. This is a time and a place to do well and to struggle for excellence in preparation for our return to God and hopefully our return to heaven where we came from in the first place. So this life with all its pains, gains, and joys is nothing but a journey. It is not a final destination. They also believe that all what God has created is in constant worship. The heaven, the earth, and everything in them are in constant worship and praise and gratitude to God. A final concept that is going to help us just to understand their type of meditation. The declaration of intent. You declare the intention in your heart to do well than it is in the name of God and for the sake of God. Before any act of worship. But also, we could apply this to our daily activities. Any good activity that you put it in the name of God, for the sake of God alone, it becomes an act of worship and a divine service. So, back to what types of meditation Muslims have. They have two types. The first one, like we said, is voluntary. And that's the remembrance of God. Through supplication, either supplication from the Quran, the Holy Scriptures of the Muslim, or supplication from the Sunnah, which is the prophetic, Prophet Muhammad tradition, what he said and did, peace be upon him. Also, through reflection and contemplation, you look in the signs of God in you, in nature, in the universe, and all around you. Praise Him and give gratitude. That's the first type of meditation. And you can do this basically anywhere, anytime, in the car, at work, at home, in the plane, or while you're enjoying the beach. The second type is mandatory. And this is the most significant type of meditation in Islam. As a matter of fact, it is the second pillar of the Islamic faith. First, to believe in God and God alone. Second is the ritual prayers. These prayers are done at specific times, in a specific manner, with specific verses from the Quran and supplications. Now, what specific times do they have for prayers? At dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and early night. 5 daily prayers that are mandatory. And these are the meditation sessions that the Muslims have in their day. Of course, this is the minimum. You could do as many as you wish. So, these are the specific times. We said that it's done in a specific manner. Well, the ritual prayers requires ablution. So what is ablution? You make the intent that it is for God. You mention God's name. You start washing your 2 hands. You start washing your mouth, your nose, your face, your arms. You wipe your hair and ears and wash your feet. Now you are ready. So the prayers are done in a specific manner. What that is, it starts with declaring that God is the greatest. And it ends with saying peace on the right side and peace on the left side. Now, the ritual prayers have units, a set of units, either 2 or 3 or 4. Each unit has a set of orderly movements. You standing up, you raise and lower your forearms, you bow, and then 2 prostrations with sitting on shins in between prostrations. Ritual prayers in the Muslim faith is mindfulness prayers. It's total mindfulness of the mind, total concentration of the soul, and focus of your body as well. So as you start, if I tell you, let me tell you something about these ritual prayers first, and then I will go through some examples of the ritual prayers that shows how meditation is done.
Let me ask, if I may, if you could give us a summary of that so we can stay on course.
A summary of?
Of the points you're about to make.
Okay.
If you could give us a summary rather than all the details.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I'm almost there.
Okay.
Don't worry. So while I'm studying and preparing for this, I really noticed, and as you know, that I'm self-prosperity coach too. So I studied meditation, the secular meditation types. I did find that this ritual meditation, it is a comprehensive package. It aligns the mind, the heart, the soul, all at the same time. And there are a lot of body benefits as well. Promotes tranquility. Promotes psychological equilibrium. Promotes psychophysical wellness. And neurophysiological wellness as neurobiological wellness. And also, it combines a lot of the techniques of what we know now as the modern positive psychology. It has mindfulness, gratitude, It has the skills of the human intelligence, CBT and NLP. As we all know, CBT is cognitive behavior therapy. In a nutshell, this is when the conscious mind changes the negative thoughts to positive thoughts. NLP is neuro-linguistic language in a nutshell again. This is when the subconscious mind is able to change the negative thoughts to positive thoughts. And all this, you're going to see it in the ritual, prayers of Muslims. Now, you are done with all the requirements. You are ready to enter a session with your Lord, one-on-one session. You direct your body towards the holy city, Mecca. You focus your eyes on where you're going to prostrate. No movements of the body except the allowed movements, the orderly movements of the prayer. You are ready right now to enter in a session, in a meditation session. It starts with God is the greatest, and that is a declaration of independence and a statement of her freedom. You are putting everything behind you, and you are focusing on the present moment. You are focusing on your meeting with your Lord. He's saying that He is the greatest, means all the cares and worries and the affairs of the world are all behind you. All your gains, your career, your joys, your pain, your stress, your worries, it's all behind you. You enter a moment of stillness and quietness. You sense the presence of God in your session, and He is the greatest. Then you start reciting the first chapter, and that's mandatory, the first chapter of the Quran in every unit of the prayer. These are the Islamic affirmation as we know it now in modern psychology or modern meditation. And basically that's mandatory. So you repeat it 17 times a day in each unit. And that's basically this affirmation. You say, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. I give gratitude to God, the master of all the worlds. I seek help from God. He is the master of the day of judgment. God, to you, I worship you alone, and I seek help from you alone. Guide me to the straight path, the path of those who received your bounties, not the path of those who received your wrath, not the path of those who went astray. You repeat this, sutras, mantras, Islamic affirmations 17 times a day, and that is very empowering. You put all the cares of the world in God's hands. You rely on Him totally. You become independent. You are not fearing anything in this world. You are with God, the source of power, the source of strength. I want to also give you another example of the meditation on the second posture of the ritual.
Just briefly, if you would, because we do need to move on.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm just in love with this. And I want to share everything with people. They've taken time out of their day and Sunday afternoon coming here to hear something, and I do understand that they do not have the background of what I'm saying. Second posture is bowing. So what happens, guys, when we bow? Physically, you're in a 90-degree. So that promotes the strength of your lumbar muscles in your back. Promotes flexibility of your spine and reduces the risk of nerve compression. That's body-wise. So what happens with the mind and the soul? You actually bow to the King of all the kings. Do you understand this? You are in a session with the Lord. You bow to the Lord and give Him your praises and your gratitude. As you give Him that, you take from this contentment, peacefulness, last posture or the last movement of the ritual prayers is prostration. So what happens when we prostrate? We prostrate like 45 degrees. Body-wise, the benefit of it, that the heart is higher than the upper body. So that helps to increase the blood flow to your lungs, to your head, and to your brain. Please note that from the beginning of the prayers to the end, the mind, since it's focused on the present moment, the brain waves slow down from gamma or beta to alpha and then goes down and down in theta. Theta is the brain waves of relaxation. In prostration, you put your forehead, your nose, your hands, your feet on the ground. You're gonna get rid of all the negative charges in your brain to the ground. You're grounded. But also, that shows you're in a position of humility, humbleness, total gratitude. You are bound to the greatest, the most high, the most powerful, the King of all the kings. You are, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, said, in this position, you are the closest to God. Do you understand what that means? You are close to the source of light. You will receive light and enlightenment. You are close to the source of peace. You will feel peacefulness in your heart and your soul. You are close to the source of comfort, compassion, and love. Give God his praises and gratitude and ask him for whatever you want to ask him for. Ask and you shall receive.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let me ask John now, and thank you for that useful background that I'm sure a lot of people here didn't know. John, you're involved with meditation beyond faith communities in the secular world. What is your take on this question that we've been addressing?
Well, we're at a very interesting time right now with science and materialism, because we have the technology now to see some of the correlates of meditation in the brain, in the physiology of the body, in our psychology. And what we're seeing is that meditation has a healing effect on every single cell in the body. And I mean, most of you have some meditation experience, and does it not feel good when you sit? It feels calming, relaxing, your heart rate slows down. There's a reason why that happens. It happens because your nervous system is being soothed and deactivated. And the nervous system has a connection to every single cell and organ and tissue in the body. And when you can relax your nervous system and soothe it, every single cell in your body is benefited by that. It goes into what they call a relaxation response, or sometimes called the rest and digest phase, sometimes called attend and friend stage. And it feels good because it is good for you. It's healing. Your body is healing when you are able to come out of your mind, come into the body, and just attend and tend to the body. You come out of your thoughts, out of your virtual realm, which we're in most of our lives, and we come into presence. We come into physical embodiment. We come into the physicality of our being. And that has a very soothing effect on the whole mind-body complex, on the whole mind-body system. And so medicine and technology is starting to be able to see those benefits and the effects on the body. So now we're getting believers in meditation, which otherwise wouldn't have been believers, because now science proves that it works. Right? And I don't see much difference really between secular practice and spiritual practice. To me, the main difference is what your orientation is, what your intent is. If your orientation is to feel better and be healthier and maybe have better relationships with yourself and with others, well, that's where you're going to go, and you will obtain that with some form of meditation practice. But a spiritual practice kind of goes beyond that. You get to the point where you change your orientation, and now you're interested in who am I? What is this presence that I'm sensing and tapping into? What is this awareness that is a universality quality of each being? Each sentient being has the same exact awareness. And so it's common for people to start a secular practice of meditation for the health benefits. And they start feeling good, and their body gets relaxed, and they're able to come out of their minds a bit. And then they start realizing, my God, who am I? And they start going down more of a spiritual path or a religious path. And I see this in a lot of people, and it's happened in my own life too. I'm much more spiritual and religious than I ever have been, even though I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy, wanted to be a priest. And I see this so often. There's a wonderful story about Mother Teresa, who was being interviewed by a reporter. And the reporter asked her, do you speak, or does God talk to you? And, no, I'm sorry, she was asked, do you speak to God? And she said, no, I just listen. And then the guy says, well, what does he say? And she said, he just listens too. And if you don't get that, you don't understand that, I can't explain it to you. And so that's what meditation is. Meditation to me is a listening practice, where I just listen to my body, listen to my mind, I attend to my body. And when you tend to something, you're taking care of it. You're paying attention to it. And you're tapping into the innate intelligence of the body. This body is incredibly intelligent. It has a lot of wisdom. Right now, there are trillions of events happening in your body that are keeping you alive. We couldn't keep track. If we had to keep track of all those trillion events, we could never do it. So your body is keeping you alive. It's a beautiful, beautiful system. But it's just the material world, right? And what's supporting this whole material world is the sacred, the immaterial, the unmanifest, the unborn. And both worlds, you have a secular world, and then you have a sacred world. And they're two sides of the same coin. They're like polarities. And we need to learn how to take care of our bodies and our minds first, I believe. And this has been my experience. If we can learn to attend to the physicality of our being, the grossest, the most physical, the most palpable dimension of our being, then when we get that all kind of settled down and quieted a little bit, then we can go deeper. We can go into the mental realms and the emotional realms, and the spiritual realms. Once we've relaxed our nervous system, we can see more, feel more, and sense more. Mm-hmm. And it has a huge physical benefit to everyone.
Yeah. I see the similarities. Earlier this weekend, Ōshin was talking about the question, who am I? Before my grandparents were born. You know, that's the question is, who am I? Well, panel members, let me pull together several facets here to ask what you might call the action plan question. And then once we hear from the panelists on this question, we'll open it up and see if you have some questions from the audience. Here's the question that really takes it out of the internal and very much puts it in the external. How can meditation be a practice that helps us build community, that promotes peace, that breaks down not internal barriers, but external barriers? And I think beneath that lies this question. I realize this is a lot being pulled together into one giant question. But how do we integrate meditation as a personal faith practice with meditation as a community practice? And if you know of specific examples of that, things that have worked in that respect, that would be A+ in your response. So, Joe, going back through the panel as we did the first round, what's your response to that action-oriented question?
When I was in Durham, North Carolina, I was a part of a fellowship called the Peace Hill Fellowship that was started by a Roman Catholic nun named Evelyn Mattern. And she felt strongly that silence was the universal language of all faiths, and that what could bring people together from all these different traditions was just to sit in a room together and be quiet. And if the Muslim was praying to Allah and the Christian was praying to Jesus, or what, it didn't matter to her really what the technology was, whether one person was doing meditation or centering prayer or saying mantras to themselves or whatever. It was just the act of being together in that silence was very powerful. And so being a part of that circle that would get together once a month and just sit, we would sit for half an hour, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we would get up and walk around for 5, and then we would sit another 20 minutes. And that was it. At the end, we might have a little bit of, hey, how you doing? How's it been going? Just a little checking in, but it was like we had already kind of checked in. So doesn't sound complicated, and yet these kinds of gatherings are quite rare. Maybe also I think people are intimidated by silence. And it's like, well, what do I do in the silence? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Am I following the correct procedures? And one of the things that Thomas Keating said when he would teach centering prayer, he said, well, so the first thing you need to do is just sit down, and that's pretty much 95% of it. It's just stopping and putting yourself in one place for a fixed period of time. In our world, how hard is that to get people to do that? To stop what they're doing and gather in one place and just sit there. It's more difficult than it sounds. I think that it has the potential, though, to build relationships on a level that goes beyond speech, and that's one of the reasons why it's really opened me up in a new way to have a deaf Buddhist monk in our midst, because it goes beyond physical hearing as well, and we can be together without interpreters in the silence.
Do you think that language of silence, that sort of being together in silence that you described, would that work beyond the faith communities? Or are you thinking, because a lot of the divisions these days are way beyond the faith communities, they're out in society. Mm-hmm. Would that work in a broader context?
I mean, we have the proverbial moment of silence. The kids begin the school day with the moment of silence, which, conservative Christians lament. Well, they used to pray in schools, but now there's just this moment of silence. For me, that moment of silence is underutilized. It's underappreciated. It becomes just another thing to check off. Okay, well, we had our moment of silence, now we're moving on to the next thing. What would it be like if we could more intentionally inhabit that space? What would it be like if we could more intentionally gather in and not be afraid of the silence? In Fredericksburg, a part of an interfaith group, and we have had times where we've been able to gather when there have been crises in the community, and that being able to just be together in silence has been a relief. We don't have to come up with words that fit everybody's language.
Yeah. It's such a wordy world out there right now. Silence sounds so nice, doesn't it? Ōshin, what about you? I mean, what about next steps that people in this community in particular might take to build community by harnessing the power of meditation?
Yes, I think I remember this story of a student asking the meditation teacher, the meditation master, how do I deal with others? And the master's response, what are others? What others? Why do we make these separations? Why do we create these divisions? So specifically in our school, the language we would use for that, it's one body. One body. So the example I used last night is, if you cut your left hand, you don't just watch it bleed. The right hand comes forth and puts the bandage on. That's how we view our practice. I'm not going to check that you're wearing the right thing first, or you're calling out the right names. It's so being just, this is natural, this is human, this is the basis of us. So it's so important to gather together and have communities where we can realize that oneness together. And we, in Zen, we try and drop and get rid of a lot of things and just get to the essence of things. And the closest experience I had, I remember watching some of you tried sitting on the floor on those cushions with me a bit. And there was a newcomer who was doing that. I was leading a session and they were probably 30 feet away. And it was their first time and they hopped up, like centering prayer. There's very few rules about it. One of the things they always add in is giving yourself a little time at the beginning and at the end to transition. And I said it's important for your psycho-spiritual self, because that's important for the physical body as well, as it needs to reorganize a bit. Now I watched this student hop up and had no feeling in the legs whatsoever. Hopped up and went down like a ton of bricks. I'm still wrapped, my legs are folded up and in wrapped in robes and stuff. And I'm 30 feet away. But before they were even falling, both my arms shoot up. Against conscription of being totally still and silent. That's my basic humanity. That's my core being, responding to another, separate or not, one or not. There it is. That's all I need to know. Yeah. What names we call it and else. So it's really important to gather together. I'm a wobbly practitioner. Physically, I am. Mentally. And I know I need you. And I need support. So that's the basis of me starting my community. Come sit with me. Let's look at this together. Let's make room for each other. Let's hold space for each other. And some days I turn to my students and say, well, thank God you're there. I could lean on you. And I hope you feel you can lean on me. And so together, our feeling of, we're stronger together. And there's so much to learn from each other when we can drop some of those things.
So is that what you are doing in Washington? Are you building community through meditation?
Yes, I thought you were going to ask, is that what I'm doing in Washington? Am I wobbling? Yes.
There's a lot of wobbling in Washington, but yes.
Every 4 years or so, yeah. I mean, that's a powerful thing about where our group meets. We can see the Capitol Dome, we can see the Washington Monument pretty much from right outside our door. So it creates a certain energy, if you will, in the environment. And we're looking a lot at divisions. And we look a lot at the divisions in our communities politically and the ways we aggress against each other based on identity ability, race, etc. But that's really what we're doing at the core of this, is we're coming together and we're learning to look at the barriers we place within ourselves and learning how to deconstruct them and in between each other. And what is that? And what is that? And not necessarily getting it right, but being passionately curious about what is there. What is that? What is that? You know, coming back to those fundamental questions. What is that? Who am I? What is this? You know? And allowing in that silence and spaces, the answers arise of themselves.
Seham, you gave us a good understanding of the role of meditation within Islam. But from the Islamic point of view, what are the possibilities? Are there possibilities for harnessing the power of meditation to build communities, to build relationships beyond Islam?
Sure. As a matter of fact, if we're talking about the Muslim community, they do the ritual prayers either individually or they can do it in a group, communal sense. In Islam, we always try to find the commonalities between us and the rest of our human fellows. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of commonalities. For one, we're all children of Adam. You are my brother and I am your sister. Whatever religion you practice and whatever religion I am practicing, that is your personal choice. But we focus on what we have together. Again, what I mentioned, this is the religious meditation, but we all have in common is reflection on contemplation. And you can do that, yes, moments of stillness and quietness and just think about yourself, about your relationship to yourself, your relationship to your God, your relationship to your human fellows. I don't see why not. That's why we can't do that in a communal sense. As a matter of fact, there is something that is so beautiful that I want to thank Joe about. In the meeting of the interfaith leaders, he always closes the meeting with a moment of quietness and stillness. So every person just put their own faith mantras or affirmations, but we're all together doing it together as a community. And that is beautiful.
Yeah. So you see that in Fredericksburg, in your work in the Bay Area of California. Did you see meditation being used in this way to build relationships?
Not really. I mean, California is very busy, very fast-paced. People need to stop and smell the roses. Because it just go, 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 go. There is no time even to be in connection with themselves, let alone be in connection with others.
Right. Well.
But it's a movement that is growing. Yeah.
John, what is your perspective on this question?
It just boggles my mind that we only see the differences in each other, despite the fact that we are 99.7% identical genetically. 99.7%. So the mind, for some reason, just glosses over that 99.7% genetic identity, identical, and just sees the 0.7% that is different. Hair, skin color, size and weight, and why is that? And Ōshin mentioned that the Zen practice is all about coming to your essence, right? Coming into your presence. And that's the universality aspect of all of us. That presence that I feel when I sit and meditate is the same presence that everyone else senses into when they sit and meditate. And that becomes our new identity. And then it's easy to see that in other humans. When you can see beyond the superficialities, the particulars of another human, and you can see the universalities within another human. And out of that springs compassion it's very simple. If you do the math, there's a lot more that we have in common than we have differences.
Absolutely.
So.
Have you seen that happen in this community? Have you seen that kind of commonality being supported in this community?
Yes, when I teach mindfulness-based stress reduction, it's a course, 8-week course, and there'll be anywhere from 10 to 30 people in the course. And by the end of the 8 weeks, I always get this sense, and others feel it too, that we're all in the same boat.
Right.
We came in there as strangers, and over the 8-week period, we've come to realize that we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
You know, we all have fears and desires and hopes and dreams, different flavors, of course, right? Different intensities at different times. But the one thing I really realize is that the only difference between me and you, for example, Ed, is time, right? You may have gone through a difficult illness, and you know, I have gone through difficult illness in the past and probably will in the future, feeling pretty good now. But you know what I'm saying? Time is like the only difference, you know? I will die just like every one of us here. I will get old, I will get sick. I'll also have a lot of great moments too, a lot of joy in my life. The 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows, as they say in the Taoist practice. And that is the universality quality of all of us. And the more people can just be still and listen, they will see that within themselves and others.
Thank you. Joe, you had something more? You say 99.7, John? Okay.
I just want to give one more example of Christian meditation, which is from the 60s, the 1660s, which are the Society of Friends, our Quaker friends. And I actually haven't discovered any Quakers in Fredericksburg. I feel like there might be some, but I haven't met them yet. They really have a lot to share with us about community that gathers around silence, because that's church. It's just getting together in a room and sitting and being quiet. I think just as another action point, it's not that hard to call for the moment of silence. And so maybe where you are, there's an opportunity to say, can we just take a moment and end our time or begin our time? Maybe even if you're having a meal together with people, it's just to say, we're just going to have a moment. We used to get together with friends, and they were Quakers, but we would always say, okay, it's time for the moment. And we kind of just knew that meant we were going to hold hands and just close our eyes for a second. And even a little bit of meditation, I think, is a wonderful thing.
I'm probably one of the few here who can remember those old days with the Quakers. Yeah. So, have you been thinking of questions? Is there a question out there? And if so, could you speak up, and if necessary, I can repeat it. Don't be shy. It's okay to say, I don't know. Yes?
I have practiced meditation most of my life, and I find it incredibly difficult. And I wondered if anybody had a magic formula for shutting off the brain. Thoughts keep coming, and you keep pushing them away, and they keep coming back. And
You find meditation very difficult. Is there a magic formula for making this happen? Who wants to tackle that? When in doubt, go to the Buddhist monk.
Like a hot potato. You're human. I'm sorry to tell you. You're human. You're gonna have. Yes, so good. You agree. Good. You're a human. And you're having human experiences, and you're alive. You know, that when we were here the first night together, what did you notice? And people really emptied themselves and really went in, and people were pointing. I feel my pulse. I noticed this in the room, and all these things. Yes. And And we don't notice that very much. All these autonomic, all these nervous system things that are going on, all these miracles that happen are constantly going on. You're a human being and you're having thoughts. Now I've been doing Zen meditation. I've been a monk for a decade, and I've been doing this practice for a long time. And yes, the more you practice this, like yoga or riding a bike, you can quiet yourself more and more. But I'm always having thoughts. Always, I'm sitting here trying to hold it together on this panel, and I'm thinking about Starbucks, and I'm thinking about it. Of course, because I'm human. And I think it begins first with kind of allowing yourself that, because there's this tension that happens in the mind and the body that says kind of like, I have to get this right. I'm not doing this right. I'm failing, and some of those voices, I tell people you can put it down just outside the Zen. You can just put it down just outside the sanctuary. You can pick it up on your way out, but you don't need it right here, right now. And just allowing yourself to do that. And we have from centering prayer, like we worked on, and we have mantras, and there's things. And in the Zen tradition, we have breath awareness, and we count the breaths. So as we inhale, as we exhale, we think 1, 2. That's it. That's the miracle. That's the secret sauce. And we just do that, and we do that. And then as we get lost, we just begin again. And again, and again. And more important than, I always tell my students, I'm never going to ask you, how high did you count? I'm more interested in the quality in which you bring yourself back to one, and the quality in which you begin again. The way you treat yourself, the way you're changing your fundamental relationship with yourself. Leaving all that at the door and really just kind of, and we got into talk about neuro-linguistic programming, we talk about MBSR, all these things. That's one of those common things that we have in all these traditions. Just keep coming back, just keep coming back to one, again and again. And how do you come back to one? That's the real miracle. That's really what you want to do. Does that make sense?
Anybody else on the panel have a magic formula? Okay. I am awed again by the power of Starbucks based on what you just said. Even a Buddhist monk in meditation can be thinking about Starbucks. We have broken the ice. Now you can ask your question comfortably. Who else has a question? Yes.
I don't have a secret formula that I can share with you what my teacher has taught to me and to other students about. One of the things that he
A little louder, please. Good.
I don't have a magic formula, but I can share with you what my teacher has shared with me and with other students. One of the things that he said early on was keep a little notebook and a pencil with you, because it's so unusual for people to sit down and take any quiet time that the first thing that's going to bubble up is your grocery list and what you forgot to do and what's on your calendar. So just take a moment and write that down. And, okay, so that's done. Then the next thing is, like Ōshin said, be aware of your breath. And one of the first sort of mantras is Seham, and you say so on the in-breath and hum on the out-breath. So you just follow your breath, and you follow your breath, and you follow your breath. And then it'll begin to slow down a little bit. And then if something bubbles up and you have to write it down, you do that. And then if you have a mantra, or if you have a prayer that you're practicing, then you begin to say it, and that occupies your mind. And then things tend to pop up less often. And the other thing is not to have lofty goals of sitting for a long time. That if you can target 5 minutes, and then 6, and then 10, then eventually you'll feel very comfortable because you've learned what it's like to be quiet.
Thank you very much. Yes, good thinking on the mic. Let me get the mic. And we have a question over here. Yes?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. As far as the Islamic perspective of what you were talking about, doing my prayers, I'll talk about me, doing my prayers, there's always things that I remember. Oh yeah, you got this meeting. Oh yeah, there's another this and all that. And what we are taught to say is, A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim, which means I seek refuge from Satan. Meaning, Satan is trying to get you busy to think about, Munira, you're late for that meeting. You're late to go to St. George's. Somebody's waiting for you, or this or the other. So every time when this happens, and it happens a lot, you got your forehead to the floor there, and you're asking God, please, we want Fredericksburg to be a harmonious community and all that. And then you're thinking, oh my God, I think I'm about to do this right now. So all I do is say, I seek refuge from Satan. And I just repeat that and continue. And it works for me.
Our scripture lesson at church today was about Satan. Satan appeared, the devil appears, tempting Jesus in the wilderness. And the meaning of the devil, the word diablo, means the false accuser. He's the one who spreads lies about who we are and what the world is to be. And so I think of meditation as that opportunity to let the lies go by. And I loved your story, which I used in my sermon this morning, and that was invite the devil in, but don't serve him tea. And then open the back door and just, yeah. And I think that's what the thoughts. The one person has said, it might have been Thomas Keating, said that the practice of contemplative prayer is not a practice. It is not the steps. Contemplative prayer is the condition of being in prayer with God. And that prayer comes with the thoughts. The thoughts are there with the prayer. And so I think that's one thing to think about too, is that just because you have the thoughts doesn't mean you're not praying. Doesn't mean you're not meditating. They're just part of the process.
Anybody else on the panel? Yes, John.
Yeah, this is an important problem and question, especially in Western culture, is how to not make this God, basically, make our thoughts so relevant. And the Buddha was assailed on the night of his enlightenment. He was assailed with these same issues that we're assailed with all the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions. And what he did is simply he put his left hand, on the earth and touched the earth and said, "The earth is my witness." And my sense of what he's doing there is he's grounding himself into his body, into the earth, into what's really real, which is right now, right here. It's solid and it's real. The thoughts are not, they seem real, but they're really not real. Right? So we're just grounding ourselves into a more essential, foundational reality. And so if we can just pay attention to that and try not to make these things a problem. Let them come and let them go and see what remains. Notice the space between the thoughts. Notice the thought come. It appears, stays for a bit, and then it just disappears if you let it. But if you try to resist it and try to follow it, it's what we do with the thoughts that's the problem, not the thought itself. The mind secretes thoughts all the time. It just secretes them. They're spontaneous. And the question is, what are you going to do with that thought? Are you going to follow it? Are you going to try to push it away, resist it? Or are you just going to let it float by in the vast, quality of the sky? So it's a matter of not trying to resist the thoughts, because resistance is futile. It never works. It's a matter of paying attention to what's really real, which is right here, right now, in the body, and grounded to the earth. So that's a very good question.
Yes, Ōshin.
I just wanted to add that in the Buddhist view, we talk about the 6 senses. We talk about the sense, the hearing, the seeing, the taste, all that. And the 6th one is the mind itself. We deal with it as if it's its own separate aggregate of everything else. But it seems to me it was very disorienting and company at the same time to deal with when I first encountered this teaching, because when we come from a Western context at a time, I think, therefore I am, we just so overly identify with our thoughts. And so when we're able to kind of say, no, that's just mind, that's a function of mind. The mind is doing what it needs to do, and it's over here. It's not really who I am. And the more space that we can kind of get, the functioning, you just feel so much freer and so much calmer. And so that was the example I was using in my teaching, is that our thoughts, I encourage people to just look at your thoughts to be like clouds. It's like laying on your back in a park and just, saying, well, that cloud looks like this, and I'm going to tell a story about this cloud. And that's what we're encouraged to do by our culture. But what if you just say, that's just a cloud? And you stop identifying with it so much, then what you end up experiencing is you are in fact the sky. You feel quite limitless, you feel quite open. And then you start to understand things like thoughts and emotions and all these other things that go on, yes, are real in some sense, but they're also just like the weather. They're not actually what's eternal and what's going on beyond that veil and what's going on there. So, clear, bright days are nice. I want to have clear, bright days. I want to sit down and not have thoughts. I want this to feel really good. And it doesn't always. Sometimes it's stormy weather out here. And not just Starbucks, but beyond. Thoughts about thoughts, and thoughts how I feel about my thoughts, and how I feel about this thing. And we just layer and heap it all on. And I just take another breath, and I just come back again and again. And it's the freeing, when we can just move beyond that habitual mind just a little bit and start getting tastes of that. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Joe, is there going to be coffee offered downstairs after the session? Do you know? Is that part of the treats?
I lost an hour last night.
We're down to our last couple of minutes. Is there one last question? Yes, Bob. Bob's pretty good at bellowing it out, but we're going to give you a mic anyway.
Thanks, Ed. I just wanted to go back to what Ed was asking about, how these practices of silence and meditation and contemplation can be across all faiths and in our secular lives, sort of as next steps. How can we go beyond to be with each other? And I was taken back to what we were introduced to by Ōshin, was the Zen, the Buddhist idea of first principle, I think, not knowing, and letting go of the idea, perhaps, that we know the answer, and perhaps as if in our lives, our secular lives, our spiritual lives, our religious lives, if perhaps we could have groups of people who would actually practice the idea of not knowing, letting go of what I know the answer to this, and saying, I don't know. And I don't know what it is for you, and I don't even know what it is for me. And begin building a unity in that way.
Who would like to address that? Any thoughts on that? Yes.
Just really quickly, I also do psychological research, and there's the Episcopal process sometimes. We're encouraged in research is to actually write down what we know before we begin. Write it down. stick it in a drawer and slam that drawer shut, and then you can begin research. So there's even some things within Western, evidence-based practices and stuff that acknowledge we have to kind of, in order to see what's really going on, we have to kind of step outside of ourselves in that pure Western kind of way to really see that truth. And I wonder if, things like mindfulness-based stress reduction and some of these practices, that might be the glue to connect some of us in the faith-based traditions to be, what is that? What is the secular practices? What can unite us all? And reaching across ours, this is the start here, in having this panel here, these people coming together and sharing our ideas. And I hope it takes root in this house.
It takes humility. Saying I don't know, but I think Ōshin and I were talking about this yesterday. There can be sort of a cultural eliteness around meditation these days. This sense of educated people are the meditate. Oh yes, I'll meditate. And so I think we also have to be careful about how we even invite others into the space. Would you like to come into this rarefied meditation air with me? And I don't know necessarily the way to bridge that gap, but I think that's important that we say that as we reach out, to always have that sense of humbleness.
Again, I think finding commonality is a solution. I do understand that different interfaith groups hold on to what they have, but if you cannot find the commonality between the interfaith groups, then we turn to John's way, the secular way, and everybody can tailor it to their faith. And I guess that's a solution where no one will feel that they are polluting their faith if they do it this way or this way.
Thich Nhat Hanh, a famous Buddhist Zen master, said, peace in oneself, peace in the world. And I think it starts at the bottom of our own hearts. And then it oozes out of us, right? Peace oozes out of us. We go to the cashiers, we see somebody walking down the street. You might not say anything, but just it kind of oozes out of you, this sense of peace. And but I really think it starts at home, from the bottom up. And without that, I don't think there's really any way to have peace in the world.
And the last words come from the doctor. So join me in thanking this extraordinary panel for tackling these important issues. Joe, did you have some final comments, or did you want us to take a moment before we leave this room?
Could I say something you said, John, kind of triggered for me.
Hang on just a moment, if you would.
And my voice sounds so bad. What you said, John, triggered something that just bubbled up real quickly. The meditation of the cave of the heart. And I think probably every spiritual tradition has a meditation of the cave of the heart.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think it would be appropriate if we ended with some silence. Can I invite Ōshin to lead us in a closing meditation?
So let's find a comfortable and sustainable posture. Let's find a posture that is both upright and alert, but also relaxed and feels grounded. We'll place both of our feet firmly on the floor, and you can place your hands in your lap or on your thighs. And in our tradition, we leave our eyes partially open but relaxed and our gaze downcast. But if you find that troubling, you can close your eyes. And I want to invite you to just turn your attention just to your breath. Either the pure sensation of your breath coming in your nose and filling your body, and what that feels like. And allowing yourself to just arrive in this moment again and again.
Thanks for each breath and give thanks for this time together. May God bless us and keep us and continue to bring us together as beloved children. Amen. So, if you'd like to visit some more, please come join us downstairs. And as you came in, hopefully you saw, if you are interested in more information about the ways we'll be continuing our Lenten season at St. George's, there's a purple brochure. Feel free to take one of those or check out our website. And again, thanks for coming this afternoon and giving this your attentiveness and mindfulness. And I pray that it bears some fruit for us all.